the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
The West Division leaders bomb out in Steeltown. BC played their very best down the stretch. Tre Ford draws comparisons to a CFL Great, and after running for 124 yards for 2 points, does the CFL need to re-examine its scoring system? These issues and many more are certainly up for discussion right now on the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. Thank you so much for checking in for the most informative, opinionated, and of course fun 3 Down podcast with the CFL's top columnists, broadcasters, and personalities. Of course, as you know, I am Bubba O'Neil. Joining me this week with top-notch coverage of the league, highlighted by the Argonauts and Tiger Cats from the Canadian press. Nice to always have you there, Dan Ralph.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, he played the game at a high level, but now offers his outstanding analysis on the Riders pre- and post-game. Oh, the Riders. On CKRM. Eddie Steele, this is always a treat to have you, Butter.
Oh, it's good to be with you guys. I appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, guys, let's talk some football here. Hamilton 29, Winnipeg 23. Dan Ralph, the biggest surprise to you, the Tiger Cats victory or the Blue Bombers loss?
Tiger Cats victory. I mean, after what I saw from Winnipeg the week before against Saskatchewan, and also the fact that this time last year they did the exact same thing, have a big win and then go into Hamilton. I thought 2023 that would play on their minds and that they would come up with another win. So I was surprised. I was surprised by that. I mean, BC's comeback. I mean, Eddie can attest to this. You know, personally, there's no such thing as a safe lead in this league, so that doesn't surprise me. We've seen some wacky stuff in this league, but to me, Hamilton's win at home, where they've struggled against the team that's right now atop the West, was the biggest surprise.
Eddie, to you.
You know, I gotta say, I was really surprised by the Hamilton win as well. Winnipeg has been so dominant. We know that over the years, but even this season, coming off of their losses, they've responded and they've beat down their opponents. They're coming off of a beat down of the Riders here. So I thought Winnipeg was going to keep that momentum rolling here into Hamilton because, quite honestly, you know, I'm not totally sure what the Ticats are. You know, there's so many peaks and valleys throughout their season. Jekyll and Hyde, essentially. You never know who's going to show up. But they showed up, and a big reason, I believe, why they were successful, they shut down the run game. And they held Brady Oliveira to essentially under 50 yards. And to be able to do that, that's Winnipeg's bread and butter. That's where they make their money, is that run game, because it sets everything up. And Ticats did a great job throwing three interceptions, and it's a nice victory, man.
You know what, Dan, what surprised me, I'm going to have to say this straight up, was the turnover situation for Winnipeg, which has been kind of, it's showing itself a little bit this season. Zach's, I think he's got like 17 interceptions, which I think is a career high for him. But yet he still sometimes gets away with it.
Yeah, I've always found good teams are those that they can overcome their mistakes, and that team is still very good. And to Eddie's point, the reason why they're very good throwing the ball is because they can run the ball too. And you can't just sit back and wait for the pass or go after the quarterback. And he's you know, I think he's been good. I'm not sure I'd say great just yet, but I'd say he's been good. But they've been good enough to overcome those mistakes. But you know, you play the turnover battle, or if you play the turnover game enough, it's going to come back to bite you. And I think your point's well taken too.
You know, Eddie, is he become a little careless, or maybe a little too overconfident with which is one of the better receiving cores in the league?
No, I wouldn't say he's become careless. He's taking shots, definitely, but I don't think taking shots in terms of putting it downfield and going after some big plays, I don't think that's careless, because you got to let your guys make plays. He had 3 interceptions, but he threw for 350 yards. So, you know, and their offense up until this game, really, in a previous other L's sprinkled in earlier in the year, their offense has been running at a high clip. So, you know, despite the turnovers, he's still a front runner for MOP. So, you know, it's the good with the bad, right?
The flip
I think
side,
he just has. Yeah, I just think he has ultimate trust in everybody around him. So he's gonna maybe throw a ball that another guy who doesn't have as much trust and confidence in his guys would throw, because he knows if he throws a jump ball 9 times out of 10 they're going to come down with it.
Well said.
The one time it doesn't, right? Like Eddie says,
Yep.
you live with the good and the bad.
Dan, on the flip side, what about the guy running the offense on the other side, the Tiger Cats? I mean, it's been a slow, steady progression. That's 3 wins out of their last 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, when they hired Scott Milanovich back in training camp, we figured how long it was going to take before he assumed a more prominent role in the coaching staff. And I think what you're seeing from him as a play caller is they're giving the run an honest chance to develop. And when Hamilton went into BC and beat the Lions, who was a primary factor in that game, and that was James Butler. And I just think when you get him going, to Eddie's point about Winnipeg, when you get the running game going, then it opens up everything else, especially, what's a rookie quarterback's best friend, and that's a running game. And I think you're starting to see that with a guy who has always, put the running game very, very high in terms of importance with his offense. And we saw it with Toronto in 2012, and we've seen it throughout Scott's career. And I think, he understands that he's got a first-year quarterback, and you try and sort of put him in a position where he can accentuate what you're doing rather than put it all on his shoulders and make him have to do it.
Where do we see these Ticats right now in the East discussion, Dan?
I see them as a playoff team, and that's the only clarity I've got right now, because they've lost the season series to Montreal, so they can't afford to finish tied. They have to finish ahead. I'd have to look at strength of schedule and see where they're at. They play Toronto this week. That'll be an interesting game, only because Toronto's now cooling its jets for the next 6 weeks. And, I don't know what the schedule, strength of schedule is for the two teams. I think they're a playoff team. I think they're a solid playoff team, and I think I'll go on the record and say we can eliminate the whole West crossover right now, because I think Hamilton and or Montreal are going to finish with more wins than the 4th place team in the West. But I'd like to see Hamilton and Montreal play once more, and I think they do. And that to me will all of a sudden, Hamilton will be playing for second, not the season series, because the season series is done. But that to me, they have to finish ahead. So I'm not ready to anoint them as the second best team in the East just yet. But you know what? They're a playoff team.
Well, they got Sask, Calgary, and Montreal. You're right, still left on the schedule, though, and they've seemed to do well against those West teams so far this season.
They do, yeah. I mean, they proved a lot to me going to BC and winning emphatically there. So.
Hey, guys, if you saw that game with obviously you did, the Ticats and the Bombers game, Tim Hortons field went wild when Tariq McAllister returned a missed extra point, some 126 yards, I believe it was, and it was 2 points. And he actually went on Twitter and said, man, all that running for 2 points, with a little kind of funny emoji mark that he put on there too, and had lots of response. And it has opened up some conversation that, should those returned extra points that do end up back in the other end zone be worth than more 2 points, Eddie Steele?
I'm kind of old school. I'm a traditionalist, So for me, the change of that would I don't, for what really? Like, I get that it's a big effort play, but why? You've worked so hard to get a touchdown. What, you miss the convert and he returns it and they get a touchdown back the other way? To me, that's just not justifiable in a sense, but I am old school in my mentality. I feel like getting those points, you got to grind and work. Now, I'm not taking anything away from a special teams guy, because I've been on both sides of the return where it's happened to me, and I've been on the touchdown scoring side, and it feels great, and it's a lot of effort by 12 guys on the field. But do I think it's worth more points in a convert situation? I don't think so.
Dan, do you?
Agreed on all points, and I think the more important thing what that play does is it generates momentum shift, and I think you can't put a point value on that. I'd like to keep it at the 2 for the same reasons that he says. I'm a traditionalist as well, but I think more important is the momentum shift that created, and when that happened, you could feel the air go out of Winnipeg's sails a bit, and then the wind go into Hamilton's sails, and that to me is the true value of that play. I mean, and to be honest, it doesn't happen enough to really justify all of a sudden trying to reinvent the wheel with it.
Well, that's interesting, guys, because I mean, you think about it, the more rare plays that being, what happened there to McAllister going 100 yards the other way for the missed extra point and a safety. The two rarest things are actually graded at the low, pretty low on the scale of 2 points in terms of getting a safety or, returning an extra point for that 2 points. And in a game that's sort of looking for offense and looking for scoring, Eddie, and I guess you are a traditionalist, that you don't want to see that change.
Yeah, and like all of a sudden, what can we throw in that 100-yard bomb to a receiver is now worth 9 points instead of 7, and then you got to kick a field goal. Like you can change so many different things to try and make it more exciting and more offense. But I think right now there doesn't need to be any changes to make it more offensive. The game is, I don't know the stats, but the game to my naked eye is exciting. Offense is there. I don't think it's lacking in offense and drama towards the end of the games. That's typical CFL, and that's why we love it, man.
Well, Tyreek, you're going to get your 2 points, and that's all you're getting according to these cats. Hey, guys, late in the third quarter, the Lions are down by 19 points at home to the Ottawa Red Blacks. And then you all know what happened. On a scale of 1 to 10, Eddie, what was your shock level and why?
Oh, 10. Shock level was 10. Just Ottawa, the collapse. BC's a good team, good playmakers. Roster-wise, they are definitely the better roster out of the two teams. But, when you're up like that, you got to finish a game. And Ottawa, just with the season that they've had, and Coach Dice, I love Coach Dice, but there's been some questionable decisions throughout the season, especially the past few weeks. And there's just a lot of things that make you scratch your head sometimes about that organization. So the collapse of Ottawa, BC, great comeback at home and whatnot. Especially, I'll say this as a player, when you're in BC and they get that little bit of momentum, honestly, you feel it. It's like a wave. It's one of the few stadiums where you actually can feel the momentum. So it's understandable. I get it. But Ottawa, man, that's such a rare opportunity to travel out west and snatch a dub, because it's hard to do for the far east teams going all the way out west. It is hard to do, and they let that one go.
1 to 10, Dad. Shock level.
12. I'll be honest. I turned it off.
Whoa!
Yeah, likewise.
I had to wait till I got up the next morning and find out that there was 120.
You're joking, really?
No, I turned it off. I got, I was looking, and that first half was uninspiring for a generalized football fan, and I turned it off. And I shouldn't be, because we've all seen it, but I'll admit I turned it off, and I found out the next morning not only did they win, but how they won. And it's like, wow.
I turned it off, and I went to Twitter, and I had to go back and turn it on.
Oh, wow. See, yeah. But, I mean, I should, again, not surprised, but to Eddie's point, Ottawa's problem this year hasn't been staying close. Ottawa's problem this year has been finishing, and we saw it early. I mean, we saw it in Hamilton, Bubba, when Crum came in and replaced Jeremiah Mazzoli and came within a yard and a half of forcing overtime. And then he had the magic where he forced overtime and got them the wins. But in the last month, they've been that close, and that's what's going to bite them in the end about finishing in the playoffs. And you know what, I have no problem with Coach Dice's decision to go for the field goal that Williams ended up returning, because he's got a kicker who has made it from 53 in the same game. He's indoors, so weather's not a problem. And if he wins that, it's a 2-possession. It goes up to almost a 2-touchdown game. And I have no problem with the decision. Now, it's not Bob Dice who has to kick the field goal. And I would put a game in Ward's hands 10 times out of 10, because I think he's one of the best. He missed, that's all. And Williams returned it. It happens.
It's the game. Yeah, you're right. One thing that, to your point as well here, Dan, that is awesome to see is he put the game in his players' hands because he trusts them. And that is a good thing. He trusts his players.
And how do you fault that? I mean, that's what makes him a player's coach.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
Yet that doesn't seem to be the conversation in Ottawa right now. And I guess that's what comes with the loss, I guess.
Well, 7 straight, isn't it? 6 or 7 straight?
Yeah, and that's the X
plenty
factor.
There's plenty to criticize. And like I said, they've been that close. And, I mean, the week before, Nate Bahar goes on record and calls the Ticats dirty and gives a team that's playing with 4 games rest more incentive to come and play the game. Why do you do that?
Yeah, no need. Unnecessary. Unnecessary.
With that said, though, guys, is there anything to be said about BC and their level of play and Vernon Adams' level of play, Eddie, going into that contest and the way they sit in the West Pantheon?
Well, BC has been, a top 3 team all season. It's been BC, Winnipeg, and oh man, I'm having a brain fart right now.
Toronto,
sorry. I was going to say Montreal. No, that's not Montreal. BC, Winnipeg, and Toronto all season. It's been a 3-horse race. And BC has shown really, really awesome flashes. Vernon Adams, I'm very happy for him. Vern was a teammate of mine back in 2017. And you watch the trajectory of his career, and it's been, again, kind of like what I alluded to with Hamilton's season earlier, peaks and valleys. He's had success, but he's had some real tough struggles. But right now, he's bearing a lot of good fruit in BC, and it's awesome to see good playmakers around him. Jordan Maximic, I think, is a really good fit in terms of OC out there, in terms of the offense that he calls. Vern, his arm, honestly, is surprising me right now. His arm strength is really good. He has a talented arm, and I always thought, I never thought that he had enough juice on it, but his arm strength this whole season has been very impressive to me. So I'm very happy to see where Vern's at.
Dan, your thoughts about BC?
I think they to me, they're the ultimate big explosion, big play team on offense. And much like they were last year with that Rourke kid. I just think that means to me that they're in every game they play. And this last game showed that, there's no such thing. And they need just that little spark. And if they get it, they're dangerous. And I think good teams to me play complementary football. When your offense isn't clicking, then your defense or your special teams. And if your defense isn't clicking, then your offense and your special teams. And if all 2 aren't clicking, then you get a big play on special teams that lights the momentum. And I think once they get a spark, I think they're good. I mean, would you like to see them be more consistent? Yeah, probably. But Eddie can attest to this too. I mean, in pro football, you only need to win by 1. How you get there doesn't matter.
Yeah. Overall, sorry, Bubba. I wanted to say their defensive line too is a really good defensive line, and you see that actually with all the top 3 teams: Winnipeg, Toronto, BC. Good defensive lines, and we've seen BC's defensive line win them some games this year. So that always helps coming down the stretch run.
Guys, kind of a general football conversation has sort of, percolated, and it continues to create discussion. So I'd love, and especially Eddie, you being a former player and understanding the nature of injuries, and obviously the Aaron Rodgers injury. I mean, that's not an NFL or a CFL thing. That's a football conversation, and the NFLPA. They're making a call that all stadiums should be moved to natural grass to maybe limit the likes of the knee and Achilles types of injuries on a harder field turf surface. Eddie, should the conversation extend to the Canadian Football League about all teams having grass surfaces to play on?
Myself, I preferred playing on turf. I only played on grass once in my entire pro career, and that was in Moncton for a touchdown Atlantic in 2011. And that was my first time playing on grass since I was in college. And the one thing about it, when you land on grass, it's softer, but I felt like I was a lot slower, like my cleats were kind of stuck in the grass a little bit, whereas on turf, I feel like I was a lot sharper, could get in and out of my cuts and things of that nature. And if you really pay attention, the people who are talking about the grass, and I understand this perspective, it's more receivers and people who are out there running and cutting at higher speeds because as linemen, you're not getting a whole head of steam and trying to plant and stick your foot in the ground. So it's different for me. So maybe that's why I preferred the turf. But that's just my opinion. I like the turf. And the people who are really talking about grass are more of the skilled position guys who deal with more of the higher impact type things.
Dan, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we can talk about grass all you want, but it all comes down to who's going to pay for it. And I'd be, you can have the conversation. I mean, but I don't see it going anywhere. Just from a cost perspective, and to me, that's where it ends. I understand the player benefits, the health benefits, to a point, but the reason why they're at artificial turfs to begin with is because they get more bang for their buck, and they don't have to put a whole lot of maintenance in the field. And the maintenance they do put in is much more cost effective than having to replant sod or having to resod it or replant it or put a tarp over it and bring it up. I get it. I mean, I'm the last person to comment on it because I don't play on the stuff. But I can't imagine.
I think even visually it looks better. I think feel like I think it does. And I think in Edmonton, didn't they go in reverse? Wasn't Edmonton natural grass and then they went to field turf?
They went to turf.
They were.
Yep.
And then in December, remember every time we had a Grey Cup out there and the grass and the field was frozen solid, we complained about how it was like an ice rink. Mm-hmm. Can you win?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you're playing your championship game in near December.
On skates. Yeah. I remember wasn't there 1 year in Edmonton? I remember a Grey Cup out there. And the story was the field because the field was very icy.
It was a game.
So wasn't
I
that
believe
the Calgary Grey Cup?
I want to say 218.
It was 218, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I remember another one too with Edmonton. I guess it was Montreal was playing in that game too. And that receiver Copeland, I can't remember his name.
Jermaine.
Jermaine. He was doing a lot of complaining about that he just couldn't do anything in terms of making running routes or anything like that. But,
well, maybe he should have talked to Wally about Staples then.
A famous story from 76 in Montreal.
Yep, 76 or 77. I can't remember.
What a game! The Big O. Yeesh. Guys, this is really, I think, fun. The Tre Ford has all of a sudden become what we experienced last year with Nathan Rourke. I think we could all say who were on the podcast and kind of said that Nathan Rourke was must-see TV. Well, this may be different. The style may be different, I think. But I find myself, I don't know where Edmonton's going. Will they make the playoffs? But I feel like I need to see Tre Ford develop and continue to play the game. And even someone that I think we all have a lot of respect for, Glenn Suter, he keeps continuing to hint that this guy reminds him a lot of Doug Flutie. Dan, you saw him in close range being a columnist. Does he do the same to you?
Not yet. I mean, to me, Flutie was one of a kind. He's a generational player. However, I do turn the TV on to see what I'm going to watch from Tre Ford because every time I watch something, I see something different. I mean, I still remember that scramble like that. It looked like he was dead to right, and then he reverses field and gets a first down. And I'd like to see him develop more a bit as a passer, but I mean that will come. And he's a young quarterback, so the first thing he's going to do is trust his legs more than he trusts his arms, and I get that. But I just want to know where he was all year, because if we're seeing this now, could he have helped them earlier in the year, and could they be in the playoff mix if he had come in, say, after 5 or 6 games instead of midway through the season?
Eddie, they were making T-shirts, hashtag free Tre Ford. Like, what was Chris Jones thinking? And I know there was a financial commitment that they had made forth to Taylor Cornelius. Was that it?
Look, I gotta, every time I get the opportunity, I go on record and saying I was wrong. I thought Cornelius was going to be the guy just solely on the intangibles, the huge arm, huge stature, can run. But, there's more to playing quarterback than just the physical intangibles. You got to be a leader. You got to be a captain in the locker room. You got to be a guy's guy. And he wasn't that. He wasn't that at all. And Tre Ford has stepped up. I think it is too little too late in terms of making the playoffs, but he's stepped up and brought a lot of excitement. I think Jarius Jackson stepping up, not stepping up, but being promoted to OC has helped that. To Dan's point, in terms of passing, I would like to see him become a better passer as well. I think part of the reason there's so much hype is because the Elks were in such a point of despair all year. So any signs of offense would be amazing because there was no life there. So now we're seeing some life. They're competing, and quite honestly, they're one of the hottest teams right now. Going to Chris Jones and where was he all season? I can't answer that one. I think the Elks there's outcome of the season would be different if Tre Ford maybe started even 3 or 4 games earlier, but they're doing it now. The future looks bright, and all they can control is what they can control and win out and hope for some luck from some other teams.
Eddie, who does he remind you of? Is there anyone out there, or is he just so unique that he is his own guy?
Obviously Doug, because yes, the CFL ties and the stature, right? He's a small guy who can run. But again, I don't think Tre is polished as a passer like that yet. I mean, he's throwing like for 17 of 19 attempts, 17 completions, a couple hundred yards. Like he's not putting up big passing numbers, but it's very efficient. And it's a very nice mix along with the run game because Kevin Brown, their running back, and their offensive line too, they're going off right now up front. They're playing really good, strong football. So that, again, much like Zach, the run game allows Tre to be himself. It opens up these RPOs, the run-pass options. He can fake the handoff and then throw a quick slant over the middle, and boom, you got your 8 yards on first down. And that's how you remain efficient the way that Tre has been.
Dan, is it kind of like is it maybe closer to like a Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I think you could get. I just don't think he's quite that dynamic running the ball as Lamar is, but he is a threat to run, and I think he passes well enough that you have to respect that. And you got Geno Lewis as one of your receivers. It doesn't take much, and we're I think there's going to be a little bit of developing that rapport. This time next year, maybe we're talking about Tre being a 300 a game passer and for 2 touchdowns, one of them to Geno, who's getting 120 yards back like we expect him to. But yeah, I just think to Eddie's point that the offense was just struggling so much that this guy came in and injected some life into it. And then when they scored a touchdown, you were going, hallelujah, something to cheer about. And then,
it's true.
And then heaven forbid he actually won a game. And it's like, holy smokes. And then guys like me are going, where the heck has he been all year? But I just think he brings an excitement that's welcomed for that fan base. And if there's a fan base I feel most sorry for this year, it's the Edmonton Elks. Because I'll tell you, 20-plus home games, losing streak, and not much to cheer about. At least now they've got a Canadian quarterback that they can hang their hat on.
And they got a home win streak. 2 home.
And they got a home win streak.
Home win streak.
which is great for them. And you're right. I mean, it was almost not fair. I mean, you can't lose that many games at home, especially the old city of champions. And, you think about all the great, wonderful names that have played, not only at that position, but for the Edmonton Eskimos. It almost didn't seem fair. But Dan, you open up the conversation, you say the word right there that just, I think, excites me in the fact that, yeah, he's Canadian. And I still don't think we love ourselves enough. Or maybe this game doesn't love the Canadian player and especially the Canadian quarterback enough. But this is back-to-back years where this conversation, we're seeing guys excel that have the maple leaf on their chest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old, but I'm not old enough to say I saw Russ Jackson play. But there's that parallel that you have a dominant quarterback who's Canadian, and it's nice. And Nathan God bless him, every time you asked him about being a Canadian quarterback, he would always answer the question, I want to be a quarterback who's Canadian and not be deemed a Canadian who can play quarterback. And I think we're slowly maybe getting around to that. We're accepting the fact that quarterbacks can play the position, and we're talking about Tre Ford, the quarterback. Oh, and by the way, he's Canadian, rather than saying, well, we need a Canadian to step up. We're starting two straight years we've seen Canadian quarterbacks excel, and and let's hope that just opens the door for a few more.
And that, Eddie, I would think that really has to excite people at the U Sports level as well.
It does, and the whole Canadian conversation. Let's be honest. If you look around NFL, NC2A, U Sport, Canadians are balling more than ever, and there's more ever down south, more ever going to the NFL. You mentioned about Nathan and how he didn't want to be considered the Canadian quarterback, right? He's not there because he's Canadian. You just brought up, you touched some emotions for me, because you're right. It brought me back to my locker room days, and it pissed me off when guys would say, oh, you're just here because you're Canadian. That spot's yours. No, man, I was an all-decade player, like that. I wasn't there because I was Canadian. And I hate the designation of the 7 spots for Canadians, but at the same time, I get it and I appreciate it. I had an opportunity because of it. But a lot of Americans, there's that ignorance where you're just here because they got that spot given to you. And I earned this and you can come and take it from me, because teams will change up the ratio.
I was just going to say, and if you were not good enough to play, you will be replaced. There's no if, and, or buts.
Exactly.
Eddie, can I just dig in as a player? Can I just dig into that, what you just said there? Because I find that so incredibly interesting. Especially in the Canadian game, it's a CFL game, and you've got American players that have come from the States to Canada to play football. And you don't have to get personal here, but is there, or maybe you might have even heard for other teams, is there sometimes division between the Canadian and American players?
Oh yeah, man. I'll get real with it. That's why we're here, baby. Absolutely, there can be division. You say in a perfect world of harmony that there's not, but you got 80 guys from all over the world in a locker room. There's not just, it's not, and I'm not saying it's a huge thing, but Americans typically stick more together, and the Canadians typically stick more together. Now, positionally too, there's a bit of division in a locker room. Positionally, guys tend to stick with each other more too. You'll never see a DB hanging with the Hoggies. It's a real thing. And I've had experiences, absolutely. I've had experiences, even arguments that have happened because an American teammate has done or said something, and maybe in American culture that's normal, but to us it's a little different, and we take it differently, and they look at us for acting or responding a certain way to something that they say. And I've definitely seen it in locker rooms cause some verbal arguments, 100%.
Dan, you've covered the league for so long. I mean, does this surprise you?
Yeah, it does. Although I guess I shouldn't be surprised, because if you're part of an NCAA program and you've been a starter all your life, and then you come up to Canada and a Canadian has replaced me, or a Canadian's playing ahead of me, maybe that's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. But I'm with Eddie. I think cream does rise to the crop eventually, and very quickly in pro ball, because it's a win now mentality. And if you don't win now, and if you don't play well, then there's 3 guys behind you that can and will. And coaches, their job is to win. And the NFL is not for long. And I think that's the problem with coaches, is that people aren't patient. And if they start losing, then they're out of a job. So they're going to put the best players on the field that they can find that help them and give them the best chance to win. And I don't think a lot of coaches really care if the guy is wearing a maple leaf or a U.S. flag. Just let me put the best 24 I can put on the field that'll help me win.
Except at the quarterback position for many years.
Well, but I think that's starting to evolve now too, right? I mean, Chris took. Let's not forget, Chris Jones took Tre Ford in the first round of the CFL draft. So I mean, that's unheard of. Right. That was, and so, and maybe because he took him in the first round, he's got to give him some time to develop, or else it's a wasted pick.
All right, guys, time to get out your crystal balls, which I think is always entertaining. We got Riders at Red Blacks, Lions at Elks, Alouettes at Stampeders, Tiger Cats at Argonauts. Eddie Steele, the game of the week is...
Ooh. Probably
Riders and Red Blacks, Lions, Elks, Alouettes at Stamson, Tiger Cats at Argos.
I'm going Argos. Ticats Argos game. I think that's probably the game of the week, not only for the rivalry, just down the road from each other, but Hamilton has a lot to play for. Of course, everybody has a lot to play for, but Hamilton really is in control of their own destiny right now, and they win games and take care of business. It's a huge, huge opportunity they have to finish strong in the East.
Dan, you'll be covering that game. I think it's fair to say the Argonauts have dominated the season series this year.
Yeah. Well,
is there any shot here?
Yep, there's a good shot in my mind. I think now that Toronto is clinched, the problem that they've got to deal with is how do I keep guys healthy? How do I keep guys motivated? Because they're playing 6 games now that mean nothing to them in the standings. And I don't think you're going to – I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see some guys get select games off. And don't know when that's going to be. I think Chad Kelly, you're going to see him maybe in the third and fourth quarter of games get pulled if the game is one way or the other. And and I think that's going to hurt his MOP chances. But I think Coach Dinwiddie will tell you he could care less about the MOP, and he's more interested in making sure that Kelly's ready in Hamilton come the end of November. So I think Hamilton's got a shot. They got more to play for. They got, and I think there's no doubt in my mind that Coach Steinauer is going to keep all of the starters in. I can't say that about Toronto. To me, the game of the week is Elks BC, because I want to see if the Elks are for real, and if they beat BC, then all of a sudden, then I'm starting to jump maybe a little bit more on the Elks bandwagon for 2024.
Interesting to think that here. I mean, and it's sticking with the Argonauts. I mean, guys, I'm going to open this up, and I don't want to bang on the league too much here, but the fact that the Argonauts don't have another bye week, it almost seems crazy, Dan.
It does, but I mean, I've always thought let's give the league credit when it does well, and let's give the league criticism when it doesn't. But I think MLSE has something to do with this, because they only give the league a certain amount of home dates, and it's not an accident that Toronto's always the home team at TD Atlantic. So I think there's some blame to share there, and if there was a little bit more flexibility with the ownership, maybe there would be a third bye, the second last or the third last week of the season. So, but it's preposterous to think that they get 3 byes before Labor Day, and then for the next 10 games you got to play consecutive weeks. You know what? Maybe it's a good thing they clinched early, because then they can sort of play that numbers game a little bit more freely down the stretch.
It really is, and the thing is, they got the bye because they got first place. So they got that bye, and the thing about the CFL is it's not like hockey where you got to be playing good down the stretch. Yeah, you want to be, but in the CFL, you get that bye, you get one game you got to win to get to the Grey Cup. That's it. You got one home game to win. When we won in 2015 out here in Edmonton with the Eskimos, we had a bye week 1 of the season, and then our second bye was week 18, the last week of the season. So we played the whole season through. And the crazy thing about that, we had clinched first, so we had a bye. Then we had the first round playoff bye, and we had 2 weeks off, essentially 3 weeks off, before we played Calgary. We were so fresh, it didn't even matter, because the freshness was uncomparable. We just rolled them in a home game in the West Final, and you're in the Grey Cup. So it doesn't matter especially with Toronto having clinched. It doesn't really matter what they do. In that bye, it doesn't matter if you lose 6 straight, because you can get yourself right during that bye week. And one home game you got to show up for.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that.
Well, so Eddie, then you've answered my next question. Would obviously be the rest versus rust situation. You don't believe in getting rusty.
I really don't if you practice the right way. And this isn't a fluke at this point. Toronto's doing the right things because they're showing up and they're playing good football week in and week out. So obviously Dinwiddie and the coaching staff have a really good formula. You can't just go and sit players. You might, towards the end of the season, like the last game or so, you might sit guys. But I think, Dan's right. You'll try and control the reps to a degree. But yeah, I'm not a big believer in the whole Russ thing because their coaching staff is doing it right, and this isn't a fluke. The tape don't lie.
You guys kind of blew me away with your selection, because I kind of thought the Alouettes at Stamps game would, only because of the playoff situation, the fact that the Alouettes have been kind of inconsistent. They just suffered 2 losses. They had a heartbreaking loss at home to the Argonauts. The Stamps want to be in that conversation in terms of the playoffs. I thought that Alouettes and Stamps game seems kind of juicy there, Dan. Not so much.
I look at Calgary's off. I look at Jake Meyer. Between the 20s, he's very good, and there's a reason why he's leading the CFL in passes. But I just think there's been some issues there, and Montreal until they beat a top tier team, I'm thinking they're in tier 2, and they're one of the better teams in tier 2, and I'm sorry to say that, but. You take a look at how they played against BC and how they played against Toronto and how they played against Winnipeg, and they're over. And then if you want to be a top tier team, you got to beat the top tier, and they haven't done that yet. And until they do, I'm probably taking a wait and see attitude. Now, hey, they could in the first round of the playoffs, if they play Hamilton at home, they could beat Hamilton and then go to Toronto. And they do match up well against the Argos, and if they catch fire and Toronto. Starts a little slow. I could see that game being interesting, but until you beat a top tier team, I don't know. I'm a little lackluster on them right now.
Eddie, are the Stamps and Alouettes, are they pretenders?
Well, the Stamps are not in the conversation. At least the thing that the Elks have is some excitement. The Stamps don't have any excitement. They're so flat. They're trending in the wrong direction. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. The Owls, they're the cream of the crop in the second tier, right? Like they're not beating the who's, and until Cody Fajardo proves himself and really plays
the old beats, Cody discussion.
Hey, I'll say it. Till he goes out and does it, then maybe I'll believe.
Guys, I believe in you guys. You guys have been outstanding. I appreciate your efforts, your outstanding commentary and opinions. It makes this show certainly what it is and why the people continue to I guess, knock us down for week after week. And whether they like what you're saying or they love what they're saying, I tend to hear about it on social media. So, as always, Eddie, you've been very opinionated. And if people want to get to you and have a chat with you, where are they going to find you?
You can follow me on Twitter, and very interactive there. That's probably the best platform. Eddie Steele 97. You can just look up my name. Pretty easy to find me.
Listen to him, man. He just kind of invited you to meet you in the come and meet me anywhere, guys. I'll have a conversation.
I'll come and meet you in any back lane on Twitter. It's all love.
Hey, Dan, where can we find you as always? And your fine writing weekly with the Canadian Football League.
At Eddie Steele 97. At Dan Ralph CP.
Right on, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, folks, again, thank you so much for joining us this week. Another great edition of the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. As always, like, subscribe. You know where to find us on all your favorite podcast catchers. And, of course, if you want to see us visually, because Eddie's looking so good, join us on YouTube as well, too. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it. Hey, enjoy this week. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty in the Canadian Football League. Things are so exciting. And so is the CFL This Week. Join us next week for another edition on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Have a great week.